about what you don't have. You know,
I don't be talking about what I don't have.
Okay, let me just say.
I never talk about what I don't have.
Wait a minute, you just got to say, Granny, your life is different from mine.
Yes.
You know what? Let me tell you something.
I'm not saying I don't have something. I'm saying our lives are different.
Right.
I'm not saying I am lacking.
Yeah, well,
I have.
Okay, let me explain.
What God cards
the reason
He
that,
dealt to
okay,
me.
let me explain to you that I don't know how that you can't understand.
You don't know what I understand and don't understand, though.
I'm asking.
Oh, you're asking a question.
I'm listening, but I'm not comprehending. Let's put it that way.
Let's
put it that way. Okay. I'm listening and I hear what you're saying, but I'm not comprehending what you're saying. Because, let me explain to you. As I was growing up as a child, and you tell me if you was worse off or better off than me.
I know it's not about comparison.
I know, but you just tell me.
Okay.
Okay. When I grew up as a child.
And what year was this?
What year?
Yeah, when you grew up as a child, what year was this?
When I was a child.
So that I can understand, what year was this?
When I was a child, ever since I came into the world.
When were you born, Granny?
I was born in 48.
1948.
Right.
Okay.
And
San Francisco?
Yes. And see, at that point in time, we stayed in the neighborhood. We lived in Hunters Point. We stayed in Hunters Point, too. That's where I was raised, in Hunters Point. Yeah. And my grandparents, in the area that we stayed in, everybody in the area had their mothers and fathers. But we didn't have ours. My sister, we had my grandmother and grandfather, but we didn't have our own mother and fathers. Like you'll see our friends when they have birthday parties or what have you, their parents will take all the children that she invite to the party, to Golden Gate Park, rent boats and have the party, and everybody get to rent a boat and ride the boat and stuff like this. Just a big old, just a
Lollapalooza, just enjoying life,
enjoying things, and my sister, we didn't have all of that, and we didn't complain about any of that because we was grateful for what we had was our grandparents. We had the love and affection of our grandparents, so quite natural. We wasn't going to complain and I don't even complain to this day. I be so grateful. You know why I'm grateful to this day to my grandparents?
For their love and affection.
Because everybody that was around us, their mothers and fathers gave them everything that they needed. I mean, everything that they wanted, anything they wanted, they had it. I mean, designer clothes, everything, right? But me and my sister, we didn't. My grandmother and grandfather couldn't afford to give us all the things that we wanted, right?
Yeah.
But they gave us what we needed. And you know what that was?
Butt whoopings.
No.
Nah, I'm just kidding.
I'm just what it was?
What? God's love.
They put God in our life. They made sure we got to church and Sunday school to learn about God. Okay. And that's what we needed. And they gave us that.
Yeah.
And we carried that on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They gave us all of that. We didn't even know till after we got grown. Even the pastor, Calvin Jones and Daddy Casey was best friends.
Yeah.
We knew that, but we didn't know they were still best friends as Calvin Jones was the minister of the church, right? They used to be best friends at the gambling shack and at the bar and all. They was friends out in the land.
In the world.
Right. But we didn't know that they were still communicating, right? And he was communicating with my grandfather to let my grandfather know if we didn't make it to church or Sunday school. We didn't know that till we got grown, girl.
Yeah.
And I think
so who was lying and who wasn't, and who was getting their butt whooped when they got home.
Let me tell you something. One Sunday, we was getting dressed for Sunday school, and Patsy said, I ain't going to church. She said, I ain't going to church. I said, what you mean? You going to Sunday school, right? She said, yeah, but I ain't going to church. And my grandmother heard her, right, as we was coming out of the room. My grandmother said, if you don't go, she said, don't bring your ass back here.
Okay. Well, Granny.
If you don't go to church, don't bring your ass back here. And baby, I thank God every day of my life. And my grandmother and grandfather whipped our asses and made us mine. I swear I do. I thank them to this day. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't have been the person that I am today. why I gave my life to God, because Jesus died for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave my life back to Christ.
Yeah, I did the same thing, Granny.
That's when
back in like 2017.
That's why I don't do it. It hurts me to do wrong. I don't lie and steal and connive. I don't do stuff like that. You know.
Me either.
I don't be doing all that. You know. I did one thing in my life, but you know what? I asked God for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because
I remember the first thing I stole when I was a kid.
Yeah. You know, I asked God to forgive me but anyway, when I got on my knees and asked God to forgive me, I thought I was fornicating, and I wasn't, because I read God's word that anytime you marry and either one of you commit adultery, the marriage is over.
Oh,
you know what? I'm 76 years old. I've never heard a pastor preach that in church.
Yeah, they don't never get to that.
They don't tell you that, but that's the truth. If you marry and one of y'all commit adultery, the marriage is over.
Yeah, and you know there's a definition for adultery too, a biblical definition.
Yeah.
Well,
so you can't, you just can't. And I always ask God, because when I was about 6, 7 years old, I used to read the Bible in my treehouse.